Hi everybody, Radical Gardener. Well, I know it's been a while. Let me just get this a little closer. Is that good? Okay. I really haven't said much about what's been going on, but Joe was really ill. And the month or maybe 2 months before we left, maybe a month before we left, he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And you can imagine that was going on while we were selling, showing, and buying a house, and then moving from Michigan to Florida. Any one of those things would tip just about anybody, but you put them all together, and it's pretty interesting. Not to mention that we had 5 cats, a bird, and a dog, all in the car to bring them down to Florida, which was a whole story in itself. So let's get to the most important thing, which is Joe. And he's doing great. And we're doing it all through complementary medicine. We decided early on that, going the mainstream route was not for us. And he has no confidence in allopathic medicine anymore, even though that's what he studied. It was what he thought he was going to do with his life. He just thinks it's deteriorated into such a nightmare. So he was willing to trust me, and within the first month, we actually shrunk the tumor by 3 centimeters. And so the success has just continued, and now he's doing a frequency-based treatment, which has been very powerful and very effective, and we expect him to be really in full recovery. I think sometime in the spring we will maybe be all the way through this. So that's why I haven't posted as much, and along with the fact that I'm on an incredibly sharp learning curve with the garden. I mean, it's been raining here for 2 days. Thank goodness we haven't gotten any of the tropical depressions. We haven't gotten any of the hurricanes. We've gotten none of that, but we've definitely gotten the rain. And, like 2 of my trees are starting to lean. And it's like it's a real, like really, really, really high maintenance right now. And thank goodness I have a friend, Tom, who's helping me. Could I do it? I could do it on my own if this was the only thing I was doing, but I'm also teaching. I'm also trying to set up a new house, which, as you know, when you move in a new place and you're getting all set up, it takes about 9 months, which is almost where we're at here. And we'll pretty much be done with everything by the end of October. So that's great. So that's what's been going on. Now, let me give you the date. The date is it September 20th? It's a Sunday, and it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so as you can see, there's not a lot of sunlight out here, but, it's okay. Rainy days are okay. All right, what do I want to talk about today? Well, what I want to talk about is it's something that I keep coming across. Let me start over. I am reading several books right now, and some of them written as early as 1910. And they're all talking about what's going on now. So this book, which I've quoted from before, Awakening the Planetary Mind by Barbara Hand Clow, who I've always really liked and really respected. She's a real thinker. She wrote this book. She called it something else when she wrote it, the first edition of it. I think it was called, I can't remember what the first one was called. Maybe if I looked in here, I could tell you. But she edited the book, and there's a lot of new information in here. Copyright 2001. So some time back, right? All right. So what this is about is that how our brain sort of, atrophy might not be the word, but we shut down a part of our brain due to the memory of cataclysms. And to hear her tell it, and many others, according to our mythology and Plato's writings, which are turning out to be so much not mythology but historical fact, as archaeologists are finding out more and more, and as you know, getting the correct information out of archaeology, they don't want to mess with their timeline, and they're really married to the Darwinian concept, which I'm absolutely not. So this is talking about who and what we were before these cataclysms and why we were so unprepared for it when it happened. So, in other words, it was a golden era. We're talking maybe 12,500 years ago, 11,000 years ago, 14,000 years ago. In that window somewhere, there was a cataclysm, and it was huge. It was like, and she talks about all the different things that may have happened at the same time. So we went from having everything provided for us. Nature provided everything that we needed. And lived in a way where we could live in a communal way, where we were getting along. There wasn't the elite, so to speak, because we didn't need that kind of guidance. We didn't have religion. What we had was belief systems in all things natural, the stars, the planets, Earth. We thought of them as living, thinking beings, which they are. And so we were it was a golden time. It's called the golden era. It was a golden time. And then all of a sudden, there was this cataclysm. Why am I so kind of obsessed with this? Because I've been talking about it. When this whole fake-demic took hold back in March, I was so shocked at how easily people were manipulated through fear. I was shocked by it, and they continue to be. You're still wearing masks. No matter what the CDC says, 0.5%, it doesn't matter. The fear is triggered, and that's what they're going to hold on to. So I'm going to read to you and then, stop and talk about each thing. But here we go. So here's what it is. The breakdown of the bicameral mind. The breakdown of the bicameral mind. In The Origin of Consciousness, in the breakdown of the bicameral mind, neurologist Julian Jaynes hypothesizes that consciousness is a learned skill that has emerged out of an archaic hallucinatory mentality. Now, I don't agree with a lot of this, but he's a point of reference for a reason, okay? Jaynes examined historical and mythological sources for the emergence of consciousness over more than 6,000 years. In early literature, Jaynes says the gods spoke in our heads as if they occupied our brains, broadcasting from a relatively dormant area of the right brain. Jaynes says that around 3,500 years ago, we were bicameral, or split in two, with an executive part called God and a follower part called man. So this is where somebody is just into the mechanistic as opposed to the vitalistic world. But let's continue. So anyways, or split in two with an executive part called God and a follower part called man. Then we lost this facility as our left brain became increasingly dominant when we became conscious. She says, Barbara Hancock, I prefer the term self-reflective to conscious, because using conscious suggests that archaic people were not conscious, and we're saying they were. albeit more so of nature, spirits, and community. They seem to have been less self-conscious or separate from many dimensions, very much like the rare vestiges of undisturbed indigenous people living on Earth today. So they had a deep connection to the cosmos. But Janes characterizes this process of becoming conscious as an evolutionary advance. She argues that it was also a perceptual narrowing. Just like developing psychology while losing access to the stars, we have attained self-reflection during the past 3,500 years. Armed with a new sense of the separate I, our left brains matured, which certainly is an evolutionary advance. However, the fullest range of human intelligence, a balanced right and left brain, is extremely dormant in most modern people. And she said this wasn't the case before the cataclysm. Janes traces his idea of the breakdown of the bicameral brain in detail, especially since 1500 BC, when earth changes in the Mediterranean repeatedly traumatized humanity. His book is a great counterpoint to my book because we both explore the same data banks, but from differing points of view. For Janes, consciousness is located in the left brain, but in my experience, Barbara Hand Klaus, consciousness emerges out of the right brain, and then the left brain organizes its data. The left brain is merely a tool, like a computer, whereas the right brain accesses intelligence from many dimensions. She says, I am bringing Janes in here because Orthodoxy adopted Janes as their golden boy in the 1970s, since his book is based on the premise that we are evolving out of a primitive mentality to a higher level. Janes seems to idolize rationality. Yes, we have become more rational, but is that such an advance? In Janes' book, people with bicameral brain skills, artists, channels, and prophets, come off as nutty skulls loaded with babbling gods, which has resulted in the pharmaceutical suppression of access to many dimensions, right? If you're not like the rest of them, we better drug you up. I can't tell you how many people think I'm eccentric or that I'm interesting. And I just think, why isn't everybody thinking like this? Probing mythology and early literature, Janes detects great perceptual alterations in humans, and his examples are thought-provoking. While reading him, I realized that I had inadvertently reactivated my dormant bicameral brain during the hypnotic sessions I undertook to research my trilogy, The Mind Chronicles. Maybe this is because past life sessions under hypnosis are experiential. Clients move their consciousness fully into the real life bodies of past people, which is described in detail in chapter 9. Melting into these individuals with my full perceptual powers turned on, I awakened 100,000 years of archaic intelligence in my mind. Of course, I live during a time when I am not compelled to obey orders from the gods occupying Wernicke's area of my brain. So my experience of the inner voices was vastly different than it was for someone 4,000 years ago. I didn't get stuck in atavistic mentalities because my left brain endures, yet I was able to access archaic consciousness. Recently discovering time acceleration has awakened even more dormant memory, which makes whole phases in the past come alive like old movies stored in my brain. Okay, so you have heard, Art Bell used to talk about it in the 90s. You hear religious groups talk about it. You hear the quickening or everything sped up or what have you. And that's absolutely true. But what I didn't connect to this is that we're all becoming more psychic. Most of us would say intuitive. Many are not aware of it because they're not paying attention. Oh well. Considering the 9 underworlds of the tune-based Mayan calendar, I'm sure we were very right-brain dominant during the 5th underworld that spans the last 102,000 years. We became more rational during the sixth underworld. Now remember, these underworlds are time frames according to the Mayan calendar, which they called tunes, T-U-N. We became more rational during the sixth underworld, 311.5 BC to 2011 AD, and even more rational during the seventh, 1755 AD to 2011, yet now during the eighth underworld, 1999 to 2011, and the ninth during 2011. Do you see how these all ended at 2011? That's really when it just started to go whoo, 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 like that, right? All right. So all the dormant faculties in our brain are blasting wide open. And what is happening at the same time? Cosmic ray flux, grand solar minimum. This makes us increasingly psychic. So that, along with, well, it's just time for us to awaken. And the Mayans said, yep, 2011, that's when that door's opening, correct? Right? So, bicameral skills seem to be reactivating in many people with well-developed left brains, which suggests some form of superconsciousness is activating. The agenda of the ninth underworld during 2011. This is what is needed to balance our species with planetary ecology. The people of the fifth underworld, especially before the cataclysm, seem to have been in harmony with nature. See, they were in total harmony. Remnants from Paleolithic times, such as Magdalenian cave art, suggest that in those days we were immersed, fused with, and totally enlivened by nature in the primordial gardens of Eden, the golden world. She says, I found verification for this possibility myself when I traveled far back in time under hypnosis. Okay, during hypnosis. She says, archaic humans experience symbiosis with other life forms, and recovering this faculty could enable us to release nature from human control. I believe that long ago, phosphorescent in the waters of the garden, our brains were open lenses to all of nature's intelligence. Fairies, elves, you name it. Okay. Moving on. So this is all going to dovetail into the sphere thing. Now remember, all of a sudden we were hit with these cataclysms. We were wide open. And what? Right? I mean, that is a shock. So as science currently understands it, human perceptual access lies within the visible light spectrum, VLS, of the electromagnetic spectrum. Access to wider vibratory fields such as seeing infrared or ultraviolet light is probably what enables people to see and hear things that people normally are not aware of, such as hearing the voices of gods or seeing phosphorescent plant light as if they did, like they did in Avatar, right? Back to Jane's analysis of human perceptual abilities over thousands of years. As our left brains have matured, the wider range has atrophied. So that whole scope that we had just completely shut down, right? Okay. The human's access range in the electromagnetic spectrum has narrowed, yet still prophets, artists, schizophrenics, and channels are often bicameral. Since I wrote the first edition of this book in 2000, our perceptual range has again been widening very fast, which is intense and chaotic if people don't understand what is happening to them. So we're getting headaches, we're feeling stuck. Like for me, I'm feeling like I'm a little bit too dense, though that's passing. By acknowledging it sort of went away. So know that many of the reasons you're not feeling right, if you're just a little bit uptight, this is all part of really being pulled into a whole new way of being. All right. And it's been talked about for a very long time. Continuing. Instead of encouraging this great perceptual awakening that's right on schedule, doctors prescribe mood-altering drugs to shut people down. Drugs can disable reality check skills, so many people wander around in insane worlds while not at home in their bodies. It only makes them crazier, man. Since Prozac was introduced in the 1980s, people either on or getting off of antidepressants have committed approximately 85% of the random killings. The Columbine massacre in Colorado is just one example. Meanwhile, regardless of how much anybody tries to stop it, the human perceptual range is again widening. And I have said that over and over and over again when people are talking about, well, there's fluoride in the water and there's this and that, and talking all about the just spacing it. 5G and all that stuff. I always say we're gonna evolve right through that. Nothing man makes is gonna stop this. So stop worrying about all this crap. We're evolving. It doesn't matter what they pull out of their trick bag, they meaning the elite. We're evolving. Because it's time. Okay, continuing. All right, so meanwhile, regardless of how much anybody tries to stop it, the human perceptual range is again widening. Ironically, the airwaves are saturated with a wide range, wait for this, of electromagnetic frequencies, microwaves, radio, and television waves, cell phones, and internet. Modern wave technology is stimulating latent cranial potential outside the VLS in the populace. People are told they are bipolar, yet it might be more correct to say they are awakening bicameral perception. So maybe it's not a bad thing. I have suspected that. This is going to be a long one. Sorry, you guys. All right, because I'm going to talk a little bit at the end of this how C60 can help. And isn't it interesting that at the same time, our magnetosphere is weakening and we're getting the increased cosmic ray flux? Just saying. When Plato wrote the Timaeus in is it Critias? The Critias, approximately 25 years ago. According to James, humans were losing the last vestiges of their bicameral brain. Plato saved sources that reflect this archaic mentality, while he also seemed to value his awakening rational mind. Plato retained his right brain access as he added left brain skill. Plato's work is now respected because many archaic records that were thought to be silly myths have turned out to be real history, such as the worldwide myths of great floods and cataclysms. Finally, Plato is getting some respect as a historian. She says, when I was working on this revision during January 2011, I received a remarkable new consciousness idea from the New Age musician Raymond Lynch in his soon-to-be published The Unreasonable Unity of God. In the manuscript, Lynch has also adopted Allen and de Clare's cataclysmic hypothesis and examined cultures before and after the disaster. He drew some really fascinating thoughts about left and right brain function out of Mapping the Mind by the science writer Rita Carter. Carter notes that each half of the brain has its own strengths and weaknesses, its own special skills, as if there are two individuals in one skull. The left brain is analytical, precise, and sensitive to time. The right brain is more emotional than the left, and it is responsible for fearful and mournful feelings and general pessimism. Carter considers some cases of people who have suffered right or left hemispheric damage that indicate that a function of the left brain is to control and inhibit the negativity of the right brain. This idea really caught Lynch's attention and mind. Lynch wondered, why should the holistic, intuitive, and emotional right hemisphere harbor a miserable view of life, a view which is coupled with emotions of fear and sorrow? Like myself, Lynch argues that the most significant event in recent human memory is the cataclysm, which brought evil into the world that was incomprehensible to our forebears. He notes that in the right brain, things just happen. So the cataclysm has a metaphorical affinity with the right brain because it also just happened. Lynch argues that during the Golden Age, our species would not have had a pessimistic and fearful right brain. And I am sure of that based on my own travels back into that time, as well as my studies of the Paleolithic. The cataclysms profoundly changed us, possibly split our minds. And then we had to become more left brain dominant to inhibit right brain pessimism. Lynch believes, as I do, that the strong survivors who later ended up becoming the elite had been let's hear that, the elite had been able to suppress the right brain in favor of the optimistic and busy left brain just to get people to rebuild civilization. He notes that this did not have to be a permanent solution, yet it was until now, because it allowed the elite to control the people who eventually forgot the story. Why you don't erase history, and why it's really important to know our timelines. I mean, almost everything that you're being told about where we came from, when it happened, ancient wars, when they took place, where they took place, so much of that is hidden and has been bastardized as far as us getting the right information. And so that warps our consciousness in where we came from, how we survived, who we really are, how resilient we are, all these things that would negate so much of that fear. Okay, so let's see, where did I leave off? Okay. So meanwhile, the elite have been on the throne ever since because they knew the ancient story and harbored it as their secret. Well, the secret is now out, which means we all need to understand the contents of the right brain and come to terms with them. The only other alternative would be antidepressants. So do I want to go on in this part? Because there's a part over here that is so fantastic. Darwinism really pisses me off. According to social Darwinism, modern rational culture is the most highly evolved. Yet now we can see, so it's like, we were never like this before, right? We came from apes, really? Did we really? So when we wanted that third, third dimensional reality, when we wanted that experience, we said, well, let's be an ape first. I don't think so. All right, so let's continue this. So with the elite in control, when the awakening began, people got thrown into mental institutions in the 1950s for hearing voices in their heads. Now the loony bins have mostly closed down and people wander around in the streets lost on legal drugs. Unresolved trauma from past cataclysms is erupting, which is the source of some of the hideous crimes we witness in modern times. Look at all this Antifa stuff. These people are bonkers, right? Okay, this very serious issue seems to be getting out of control as hidden memory seeks the light. Freud discovered that the cause of amnesia was traumatic events, and then the amnesiac either denies the trauma or makes an effort to relive it. This is one of the causes of violent crime and abuse, and then in the collective, the desire for the coming end comes out of the need for psychic relief from repressed catastrophic memory. We become almost totally left brain dominant, but by time acceleration, now the left brain can't block the feelings in the right brain. That's why we all, not all of us, but why so many, gravitate to, oh my gosh, it's the grand solar minimum and we're not going to have any food and we're all going to die. I don't believe that for a minute. I think there's a grand solar minimum and I think that we are going to survive that. Will there be challenges? Absolutely there'll be challenges. Will there be some food shortages? Yeah, but I don't believe for a minute we won't have anything to eat. You're never going to convince me of that. I don't have fear. There's something in me that remembers. I don't know what it is. I just don't live in that kind of fear. Maybe that part of my brain, and it's just through luck, or who knows, has just been developing in a way that allows me to think like that. Who knows? Continuing. So cataclysmic popular science stirs these memories, which actually may be a good thing in small enough doses. As with memory therapy for early childhood abuse, the real story of the past encourages people to recognize their inner fears. So by recognizing, yeah, we did go through that, it really sucked, the more that people realize our forebears attained abilities that we have not yet achieved in modern times, the more they become suspicious of the prevailing historical orthodoxy. So we were really, really, really smart at one time, and we have full capacity of our brain, or our left brain, right brain, or they were more balanced. So what a thing for us to know about our species. Meanwhile, the media, like a gigantic memory fogging machine programmed by the Flintstones, repeats and repeats the false story of the past. Or the media sanitizes information about ancient cultures, why I won't watch any of those shows, which bores the public. Whatever they do, we are at the end of the progressive narrowing of human perceptual lenses. Consensus reality is increasingly chaotic as the old patterns break down and new sight into the deep past is changing how we think about our species. Suddenly, stories that were merely myths for thousands of years are history. Mythology illuminates artifacts, sacred texts, and ancient sites. Lost worlds emerge like the images of forgotten places, like images on film that materialize when it's soaking in the chemicals. It is exciting to remember who we were in the days long ago, and new theories about Egypt are excellent examples of how this process is working. Okay. So, yeah, that's why we're so easy to trigger in fear. Now, a whole bunch of us didn't fall for it. That, I think, is quite unusual. I think maybe 30 years ago, 20 years ago, a whole pile of us would have gone for it. And I just think that, we're awake. We're like, yeah, no, we're not buying it. Right? Not buying into your crap. I knew as soon as I heard it, it was a lie. I knew as soon as I heard it. So let's talk a little bit about how C60, how does this fall into it? Which is just, it's kind of an addendum to this. So many of us feel that, through any kind of toxicity that we take in, and probably fluoride has a lot to do with it. I haven't read any studies about that. I don't know how they could prove that, but it makes sense to me that when you're taking something into the body that's really that toxic, that it is going to atrophy many things in your body. And so, many feel that it does atrophy the pineal gland, which is our third eye. So C60, we suspect, actually heals that. Anytime you're talking about any kind of atrophy or, it's really inflammation. I mean, it really is. And so the fact that C60, Bob's C60 anyways, Bob Greska's C60, because it's the buckyballs and they're so tiny, probably break the blood-brain barrier and really kind of scrub the pineal gland, because and the reason that many of us think this after taking Bob C60 for as long as we have, there's been several of us that have taken it over a couple of years. We just can't believe how much clearer we think and how much more in tune we are. I mean, I keep going back to, you saw how quickly I decided I had to move down to Florida. I mean, if you have been watching my channel from the beginning, I was hanging out in Berkeley, and that's where I was going to stay. And I mean, that's just not what happened. I was just getting a whole different set of marching orders to get the hell out of there and come on down here. And I'm so glad I did. Everything about it is better. Everything from how Joe is healing to just being in the sun all the time to, just more, you're really close to nature in Florida. I mean, it's tropical. You can't get away from it. So I think that C60 is a really important part of this awakening. And isn't it interesting how that just showed up at the same time? I mean, none of this is by accident, right? So I think it was, I wasn't giving it enough, I wasn't giving the subject its due. I'd say, well, people are just being afraid and they're not living in the moment. Well, there's really deep traumatic reasons why that's been happening. And I think the more that we can recognize where that fear has come from, the more that we can free ourselves from it, right? Okay, this is one of the longer videos I've ever done, but I was really excited about this information. I'm going to continue on researching because it seems every time that I get another piece of this, I become lighter and feel more connected and absolutely less fearful. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. I will show you the garden when it's not raining. We're going to be out there again tomorrow. I put in 2 7-foot elephant ears that this guy was getting rid of out of his yard. Well, Tom did it for me. You should have seen that. That was hilarious. But, we're getting there. It is really... It's challenging, it sure is, but I'm getting it figured out. Anyways, Radical Gardener, from my garden to yours, may your garden always grow, and I'm going to send you a ton of love. Okay, everyone, bye.